This week we were able to test three. We were able to test all four, technically, all four of the new dungeons for the Midnight expansion set that are coming with season one of Midnight. And I will tell you, it was a wild ride. So we did a video on this 2 weeks ago. That was the last time there was a build with actual stuff to test. This week was, I guess, delayed because of Thanksgiving, but it's finally here. We were able to test I don't even know what the names of them are because they're so weird. I know Windrunner Spire was the third dungeon we tested. The second dungeon we tested was the Magister's Terrace dungeon. And the first one was the one with Lothraxion. Their names are so weird. I have no idea what the names of them are, but we tested that first one with the Lothraxion dungeon for a good probably 3-4 hours. It was insanely hard, and the dungeon has like a choice where you go left or right. We went left, okay? So we went right to a boss that was the hardest boss of the whole testing I've done this far. It's got incredible, insane mechanics. It's really, really, really cool, but it's not very intuitive, I think. It's got a bit of a finicky thing to it. There's like a line that you have to break by standing in it with a mechanic. If you don't, you die because the mechanic kills you. The line negates the damage from the mechanic. So it's very overtuned, at least at the time of me testing it, meaning that if you don't immediately react, you'll probably die. And then the beams they're standing in, the lines that you're standing in are like, there's many of them. There's like sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And you have to try to break more than one. That's for sure. At least 2 and sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6. It's possible. Okay. But it's not very obvious how you do it. You have to stand in it for long enough that it kind of like registers or damages the beam, I guess. I'm not really sure which. Not just running through it is sufficient, and standing in it for the whole time is pointless. So I think this fight really represents where we're going with Midnight. The mechanics are going to become extremely straightforward, but sometimes still very, very complicated to understand. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I think a big problem with that fight is its tuning. I think it's going to change, and it may have already changed because I've heard there's been changes to dungeons up until now as well, but there was no patch notes. So I don't know. We'll see what actually happens there. But this was kind of a general theme. And the real problem with this idea is that it's leaving a lot of, like, there's just a lot of downtime in between mechanics. And if you don't do the one mechanic right that you have to do right, you just wipe. It's just over. There's no, like, ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, if that mechanic was done wrong when we tested on the beta, it's over. The fight's done. We can't do it. And I don't know what that's going to look like at launch, but I'd imagine that's going to mean a lot of really bad failure, like ridiculously bad failure for the first few weeks. Maybe proliferates through low keys for a while. I don't know what it looks like at low keys. We were doing it on 12. Obviously, you're meant to be scaled on the beta, so I don't know how much harder a 2, or how much easier, I guess, a 2 is compared to a 12 even. But it's definitely something that's on my radar for keeping an eye on, because there's definitely a lot of players out there who are not going to be putting in this research. I'm telling you, I did that fight for multiple hours. I solo saved it. Like, people kept dying. I couldn't get any of the mechanics as a tank. That's another huge, huge issue with a lot of these fights. There are no tank mechanics. Like, actually, you just move the boss. That's the mechanic. Probably about 75% of the fights I've done, just move the boss. Or don't even. Just stand still half the time. That fight is so freaking cool, and if there was a way I can get the actual mechanic that I was just talking about, which I cannot, at least currently, I would love it, because I feel like as a tank, I can do a lot with that. Because it's a little dangerous, you have to kind of pop a CD to survive moving in and out of the beams to break as many as you can, but if you do it well, it really opens up the fight and makes it a lot more fun. But yeah, there was a good probably like 4 or 5 pulls of that fight where I was just like, this looks impossible. Like, I have no idea what we're supposed to be doing. Nobody else in the group seemed to know either. And I mean, we figured it out, but partially overtuned, definitely, but it took us a while. Like, it's going to be a very interesting situation. Now, a lot of the other dungeons have bosses like this as well, but I think the risk that you run when you're doing a conversation like this, where the boss has basically only 1 or 2 real mechanics, and if you do them wrong, it's over, like totally done, and everything else is like just stand still in DPS, you run the risk of making the fights very boring. And that fight that I just described was incredibly fun, and it was very visually active, and there was a lot going on, like, that you noticed and moved from. But other fights are the complete opposite. There's a fight in Windrunner Spire or Sanctum, whatever it's called, the Windrunner dungeon. It's like for some reason we're fighting orcs. I don't know, the lore crazy, but anyway, we're fighting orcs. Okay, and the guy does nothing. The boss that we fight in that area, he does actually nothing. It's really, really weird. He's got like a bunch of mechanics that just don't. I don't even know that he has mechanics. Honestly, I can't even recap the fight. That's how little there is. There's at least tank breakers on some of the bosses in that dungeon, which was fun because it was like, okay, most of these fights don't even do damage to the tank. They have a dot or something. That's it. There's no stacking, nothing like that. You know what I mean? It's super easy. And then all of a sudden he summons a bunch of ads, and you just tank those ads, interrupt the one guy, don't get hit by the fixate. That's the fight. That's the whole fight. Okay? Now that's in a dungeon that has a boss that is basically the first boss of Necrotic Wake plus the third boss of Necrotic Wake put together. Okay? So it's exactly like I just described. If you've not done the fight, I just described it to you. There's two bosses. It's like a duo type boss. It's kind of like the boss in Floodgate, where if you kill one too early, the other one enrages, and it's really bad. Very punishing enrages time. But anyway, there's like a caster boss that needs to be constantly kicked. We'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, constantly kicked. And then there is a actual like big guy. He's got a hook. You know, he's an A-bomb, right? And that guy just needs to be tanked, and then he throws the hook. And so the boss like spreads out and casts a spell, and if you don't interrupt it with the hook, you will wipe to it eventually. It does more and more damage the longer you're fighting it. And we already saw a situation where because they were far apart, the hook needed to be like pinpoint. It had to be perfect, okay? And it wasn't, and we wiped to it. So, yeah, okay? You know what I mean? And so it's like, all right, then there's puddles on the ground everywhere. We're constantly having to move the boss, and you have to hit this hook. And if you don't hit the hook, you wipe. It's so weird. It's such a weird thing going on where they're making some fights like so boring and so nothing. And then other fights are like the one mechanic that's there is so engaging. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. But another huge talking point this week for us was the kicking situation. So if you guys watched the video I made last week and know who I am, I'm very against a lot of the changes they're making, especially from the class side. Because I think taking interrupts away from healers is a major mistake. Last time we made a video, I talked a lot about how there was a lot of trash that still needed kicks. And a lot of it was stuff that was definitely going to need to be kicked. And a lot of the stuff was just fodder and didn't seem to do anything at all. Like a lot of the damage that the bolters type caster mob are doing is like not perceptible. Like I'm staring at the guy who's taking the damage. It goes off and he doesn't take damage, it seems. So I don't know what that's about. I don't know. It doesn't seem dangerous at the level we're at. And I don't know if that's because we're just over geared for a 12. I think it's possible that maybe like 15s are meant to be the new 12s because they really just keep nerfing dungeons. But they did make some changes since I made that video to the dungeons I said were problems. And I don't know that they changed what I identified as problems. But then we did the dungeons this week. And I'm going to tell you right now, the first dungeon we did that like it was like almost like a Nexus. It was like kind of Netherstorm. It kind of reminded me of like a Netherstorm dungeon, the one with Lothraxian in it. There's one caster the whole dungeon. Like it's legitimately one caster the whole dungeon. I think there's a second mob type on the right side or something. I don't even remember. Like there's one mob that casts and that's it. You fight him once. It's like a couple times maybe. But so you'd think like, all right, so that means there's like no magic damage, right? No. No. That's not how it works. All the danger is now unavoidable damage. Like there's a caster type called the Seer, something Seer. It does this incredible AoE damage that stacks up as he's doing it. It stacks up for 15 times. So the 15th second or whatever it is, like I think it's every half second it ticks. So it's like the 7th second of the mechanic is the most hard hitting, okay? And we did this with healers and a lot of different types of players, but we did this with players who simply are not recognizing that they're taking more damage as the fight, like the mechanic is transpiring, you know what I mean? The second it starts, you're taking some damage. The last second it ends and you're done. You're toast. You're dead. You know what I mean? So it's clever. I actually have to give them credit for it. It's clever. Because they're coming up with new ways to make mobs seem magical. Like not just sit there and auto attack the tank, but not like spam out mechanics. and also not be an archer. I think that's like that's kind of the biggest issue. There's a lot of times it's just if they don't want it to be a melee mob, it just shoots damage at random enemies. You know what I mean? Like it hits us instead. It like melees us, you know? So it's interesting, but at the same time, I think again we're running into the same problem here that we just talked about with the boss. You run the risk of it's now on a knife's edge, because if the damage is dangerous and its cast is kickable, or yeah, you know what I mean, like you can stop the damage, then it's a lot less problematic when it's done wrong. You know what I mean? Like if it's done wrong, you blame yourself. It's like, oh, I didn't kick it. We just got to kick it. And then if it's overtuned, it's still, well, we just got to kick it. Like, okay, that cast is way too overtuned. Who cares, bro? Just kick. You know what I mean? Okay. But if you can't stop it and it's overtuned, then it's like, well, this company sucks. And if you can't stop it, and it's not, and it's like undertuned, and it doesn't challenge you, then you fall asleep on the trash. Then the tank's the only one taking damage, you know? It's going to be very interesting. This season's going to be very, 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 very interesting. But we did that whole dungeon. There was like one caster. Then we moved on to Magister's Terrace. We finally finished all the bosses. The Lothraxian fight is going to be by the way, last boss of that one, Lothraxian, he does die. Spoiler alert. He does die. Anyway, it's not relevant. Don't worry about that. I don't know why. I don't know what the fuck's going on in this lore. But anyway, it's going to be the worst melee fight ever. It's going to be I think it's going to be the worst melee fight ever. There's a mechanic where he like copies himself, and if you walk near the copy, it does the tank mechanic to you. So there's like a bunch of Lothraxians around the area, and if a melee accidentally kind of steps the wrong way, they get hit by the tank mechanic. Kind of like reminds me of Gul'dan. You remember if somebody would accidentally walk in front of Gul'dan, it would trigger the frontal? That's exactly what it reminds me of. Looking at you, cop. Anyway, so the next fight we did was the next dungeon we did was Magister's Terrace. Had a hilarious blow up. Like this guy raged at me for not like keeping threat or knowing the dungeon or some nonsense. One of the worst we've seen, and this was on the beta. But anyway, the dungeon itself, very long. I think is another big thing. I think the timers are not accurate. I think everything's a little overtuned. People aren't doing very good damage. But I also think these dungeons are not as short as Blizzard is trying to make them. Like, I don't actually know what the Magister's Terrace number was. I think it might have been 31, maybe 30 even, but 32 maybe. It feels like a 40-minute dungeon. Like, just looking at it and pacing of it and the way there's 4 bosses, it's like this is a 40-minute dungeon. Like, it really is. And I don't know how you fix that. Like, do you just make everything have 10% less health or something? I guess that's probably what they'll do. But anyway, that dungeon is very interesting. There's a lot of very interesting mechanics. I think it has the coolest boss of the season. I haven't done that one dungeon still. We'll get to that. But I did want to make this video because that boss is the coolest boss. It's a jellyfish. I don't know why we're fighting a jellyfish, but we like those. And it splits 5 times. In fact, there'll be 5 of them on the fight. 4 of them just kind of wander around, and they all share health. So as the tank, I really liked it because I had to constantly move the actual boss into a position where you could hit at least 2 other ones. You know what I mean? It was very engaging to have to move the boss that frequently to maximize the encounter. And on top of that, the mechanics are pretty dang cool. So I love that fight. I really love that fight. And it's another great example of what you can do with simplicity. Like that's the shining example. Like very, very, very simple fight. There's just there's really no mechanic. I mean, again, there's no tank mechanics at all. Actually, 0 tank mechanics. Eventually, you get the mechanics everyone else gets, but not until the 3rd phase of the fight, basically. And outside of that, it's just move the boss. That's the mechanic of and it's great. It's amazing. It's great. It's like the most fun fight I've done as a tank ever in a Mythic Plus. Okay. And the first boss is quite similar as well. It's like there's mechanics. They spawn orbs. He's in a burn phase. You have to soak the orbs, okay? But the orbs come from all sides. So as a tank, I want to position them against a wall so they all come from one side instead. The orbs put a stacking dot on you. So you want to soak a lot of them as a tank. You know, these are great encounters. There's not a lot of complexity to them. And they're quite if you look at it from like the DPS perspective, especially, a lot of times there's no complexity to it. It seems like almost one role just doesn't have mechanics. That's what it feels like. It's just like the healer's working just like that sweating meme thing. I don't know what that even is, but the guy who's like sweating is like, going like this over and over again. That guy's gonna be the healer every time. And then the kid dancing is like that's gonna be either the tank or the DPS basically. I think probably gonna be the tank often, very often. So anyway, that's a problem for a different day. But yeah, so we did all of the first dungeon I described, and then all of Magister's Terrace. Okay, there's like 2 casters total in both dungeons. It's really, 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 really weird. Like bizarre. It's like did you forget to add mobs? There's even a mob called a healer. It's literally called that. It doesn't heal. I don't know what it does. It doesn't cast a spell, at least. I don't know. Maybe it heals with instance. But I assume that mob had a heal at one point. It had a cast, and Blizzard was like, "Oh yeah, we forgot we're getting rid of casters." So there was one pull where there was 2 casters. That was it. I pulled 2 of the same mob type. It's called Magister or something like that. It does 2 spells, an Arcane Bolt, and a Polymorph. So it's the tried and true recipe from Blizzard right now, especially the caster has a bolt that's like a fodder kick, and then it has an important kick. And so that the important kick there is a Polymorph. I don't know what that like I've not really seen it go off, so I don't even know what it does. But that's the only caster. There's like the dungeon changes from like you're fighting Blood Elves and then you're fighting Void stuff, and the caster of the Blood Elves is just a Polymorph. You just kick that. And then the caster of the Void thing, I don't, it's just like a damage spell, I guess. I don't even know. You don't really figure it out. It doesn't really do anything. So yeah, so we're talking all about this, right? And we're saying like, all right, well, interrupts, no longer a big deal. There's so few. Well, anyway, then just really quick. And then we did Winter and Spire, and that dungeon has more interrupts in it than the other 2 put together. But again, it's very similar in this way that they just don't seem to matter. Okay. But we're talking about this like, there's not a lot of kicking going on. So, healers not having a kick in those 2 dungeons especially is totally irrelevant. I can kick almost every spell that goes out. Like I literally can get it. And I said that months ago. I was like, the only way they're going to be able to do what they say they're going to do is if they make it so the only person who needs to kick is the tank. Well, 2 dungeons in, they did that. Okay, back to reality here. What did they change to modify the combat to make it interesting? From what I can tell, they gave the healers a dispel on like every pack. Like there's constantly dispels. And I'm doing Magister's Terrace and I'm getting rooted by a boss, by like a mini boss, like a lieutenant mob, and there's nothing to move out of. It's like they gave me a dispel. They gave the healer a dispel just to give him one. Like, what is the point of not dispel? I don't understand. You just press the button. It's a spell that didn't need to go out. It causes no issues whatsoever. It's a small amount of magic damage if you don't dispel it, and it's a root. I just AMS it anyway. It's like, I'm thinking I do the same pull over and over again because we keep having people DC or that Demon Hunter rage quit or whatever. I don't know what the mob does. It's like he's just the first mob in the dungeon is a single lieutenant. You guys are going to hate that, by the way. First mob in the dungeon is a single target, and you can't pull anything else. And it's one mechanic. It puts a root on me. Just me. I was like, oh, it must root everybody. No, it's just me. Just puts a root on me. There's no reason to move the mob. So I think that right there philosophically states that Blizzard is like, well, we took complexity away from the healing kind of, the width of the healing role. Now we're going to really focus in on what healers are known for, and that's dispelling and healing people. And I think that's probably going to end up being the way it goes. But yeah, on top of that, they nerfed, healers are in a weird state. Just the bars changes alone. Like people are complaining like crazy about the raid bars, the new texture. There's a new texture for when there's a healing absorb. But some other things like Blizzard made some more Blood Death Knight changes. I just want to say this again if you didn't watch the first video. The things that he did for Blood Death Knight are like... okay, let's just talk about the grand scales thing. The stuff they announced like 3 months ago. That stuff is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Losing Shattering Bone is debilitating. I've lost threat more times in 2 weeks of Mythic Plus testing on the beta than I had in 2 expansions since Dragonflight. It's awful. It's horrendous. It's so difficult to get used to because now you can't just put D&D down and let the mobs come to you. You have to actively seek them and establish threat on them. Otherwise, your damage dealers are going to pull threat. It's putting an onus on you being at the first combat of the pack. Like always, I've said this for years. The easiest way to have no threat issues is to pull mobs and not have anybody behind you, basically. Get out in front and make sure the mobs hit you and you hit them before anybody else does. That's not possible in a lot of situations in these dungeons, but it's still ringing very loudly. And then unfortunately, there's going to be times when you're trying to, I think a bigger issue is Death Grip is the global, right? So I'm putting D&D down, Death Grip 1 pack, Death Grip a second pack. That's it. They're running by me now because I didn't Blood Boil. So that was where Shattering Bone was huge, okay? But besides that, I don't feel like the rest of the changes were that big of a deal. And then besides that, the other changes they made, like they added new talents like Consumption and Reflective Shield or whatever the thing is that does damage, a bunch of other shit. It's all garbage. It is such garbage. It's incredible how bad it is. I don't know how if it's going to get tuned, but like they added these new talents that are deep down in the talent tree and they just suck. They just don't do anything. Your top damage is Blood Boil, Death Strike, and Melee, and that's it. You're just like you're playing League of Legends. You have like 4 buttons. You press Death Strike at the right time. It's impactful. It feels cool. I don't really miss a lot of the other stuff they got rid of because it's just so good that Death Strike exists. You know what I mean? I hadn't realized how overshadowed everything else was under Death Strike, even though I enjoyed pressing Bone Storm and Tombstone. Those things, it just doesn't matter because you still have Death Strike. And then that's pretty much it. And then finally, the threat issues, we'll see what happens there. I don't really know. But as of right now, it's definitely not great. So let me know what you guys think are. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I'll be back to doing that on Tuesday because we didn't even get into one dungeon, but we have a lot to learn. We didn't even come close. Did not even come close to upgrading any key. It wasn't even in the realm of possibility. We struggled to finish most dungeons. Okay, now there was a lot of DCing and like that one rage guy, like I said, but yeah, it wasn't even close. So we got a lot of work to do in there. And yeah, so that's going to be the streams for next week. I am working very diligently on a series on the leveling channel. If you guys aren't aware, I am doing a playthrough of me trying to unlock every housing decor item. There's 1,800 of them. I won't be unlocking all of them, but that's the goal we're trying to work towards. And yeah, going to continue pumping out videos. There'll be 2 more reviews coming this weekend. So stay tuned. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are. And especially if you played on the beta, how do you guys feel about the dungeons? And if you've done the dungeon I haven't done yet, let me know. But thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.